Disclaimer, there's no filter on this, so whatever comes out of my mouth, if you hear a beep afterwards, she's edited.
There we go. That's your disclaimer. I'm Jenny. I'm on fire fit, and this is my wonderful, sweet husband, Mark.
Mark on fire with her.
Today we are doing a video that is all about parenting, and I brought him into this because he already deals with families where he works, but we were also parents. And I just want to say, as a caveat as we get started with this, is we're not saying that we figured it all out or that we're perfect or that we have all the knowledge here. This is more our own experience, things that we have noticed as we have been parenting or as we have helped other people. And I oftentimes, and you do too, I'm sure, with your work and everything else, but we get questions about, well, what did you do in this situation with your kids? Or how did you handle this? Or I used to hear a lot from parents when we would go to, let's say, a play date and we were at somebody's house or the park or whatever. And I would say, okay, Talia, okay, Lucas, it's time to go. And they would say, okay. And we would get up and leave, and parents would say, how did you get them to do that? Because my kid always screams and cries and throws a fit. And so this is more just what we've done and personal experience, and we have not done everything right, and we certainly don't know, everything perfectly. But I just wanted to share the things that we have done, since people do ask us at times. So.
Well, I think it's true what you're saying. I think there's very styles of parenting. Some people are going to be child-centered, others are going to be family-centered. And I think it's an important question to ask your spouse, okay, how do we want to parent our kids?
Yes.
And I think the bottom line, however you're parenting, is, are you doing something in a loving, caring, nurturing environment? If you are, the kid's going to be fine.
Yeah.
Some styles might, and this is my personal opinion, might be a little bit more of peaks and valleys, opposed to kind of like telling your child expectations. And granted, toddlers, you're not having a long conversation about them on expectations, but things that you do in a more of a ritual manner, then they understand, oh, we over here, we do this. So
I think you're going to need to give examples, because I'm not sure if people will understand what that means.
Perfect example, of course, my wife. Talia, our daughter, was a toddler, and she couldn't go to church with us. So I took Talia to church, and we go in, and like I said, she's a toddler. She's probably maybe somewhere like around 3 years old. And she was not behaving as she normally does. And I get home, and later I said, gosh, she didn't behave like she usually does in church. I don't understand. What, was she just having a bad day? And then my brilliant wife tells me, well, before going in, did you tell her the expectations that, this is time that we want to be more quiet, and, and I go, she's been going to church all 3 years of her life. She should know by now that this is what we do. But it's enforcing the habit of, okay, we're in church, so we can't talk like we talk if we're at home.
Well, and I think what you're saying is that was the example that I think clarified what you were talking about.
Right.
Because once now our kids are 17 and 13, they do know the expectations, and we don't have to tell them when we go into church, you need to be respectful, you need to be quiet. But when they're younger, they're not only do they have a short attention span, but they haven't had a lot of experience yet to be able to remember what the expectations are. So a lot of what I learned was through my friend Lisa, who there's some good books on parenting that we both read, and just the idea that you set them up for success by reminding them what the expectations are. And so, yeah, that was a good example.
Yes.
And I love the brilliant part. I was kidding. I'm not brilliant anyway.
No.
But no, it's very sweet. Well, as we looked at some of the topics that I had put a post asking for specific things that people either had questions or just comments about parenting. And a lot of them, I believe, fall under the umbrella of how we parent as a parent versus acting as a friend. And I think that this is so important. And if you don't get anything else from this video, I want you to remember that your role is to be their parent and not their friend. And so many decisions you make will be very easy when you keep that in mind. One example that I'm going to let him explain is food with children. Now, he deals with a lot of families that are not maybe making the best choices with their food that they're eating. But what did the parents tell you?
Well, they'll just say, well, he doesn't or she doesn't like it. There's like is a preference. And if the mother's cooking the food, this is what is being served and exposing. And you put any kid you ask them what they like. You ask my own kids, I would think they might always pick the most healthiest food, but we're not there to cater to their needs. We're being the parent, knowing, okay, this is
We're there to cater to their needs, not their wants.
Yes, thank you. I stand corrected. And, if they don't care for that, oh, that's fine. But, okay, this is what is being served, and being grateful that we have this meal that is being prepared for us and eating it. And somebody that you just recently told me about, if it's a new food, it's a polite bite.
Yes.
They might not like it, and that's totally fine. And if a child doesn't like something, my kids know it's not like, ooh, it smells funny, ooh, it looks funny. It's like, they take a bite of it. It's like, I don't care for that.
Yes.
Because they're saying at that moment they don't care for it. It doesn't mean in the future they will. And just think as when you were growing up, things that you didn't really care for, but now you like. Mm-hmm. And why is that? And I think some of it is repeated exposure.
Yes. Yeah, and so, going back to the point that when you are a parent, you are there to guide them, help them to grow up healthy in their, not only physically, but in the way that they think and how they act. When you're a friend, you're just kind of going along with what that person wants and needs because you don't want to cause friction, right? So a lot of times, really a true friend tells you the truth.
Right.
But when you act as a friend and you don't want them to be upset and you don't want them to cry and it really bothers you that they're upset because they don't want to eat their vegetables, you're
Crying
acting,
is okay. They'll survive.
It's okay. And you're their parent and you know that those healthy fruits and vegetables and the various things that those are good for them and they're children and they are not parents, they are not adults, and they are not already educated to understand that. So I think one of the problems that comes with parenting nowadays is that people are very afraid to upset their children. They don't like them to cry. They don't like them to be upset or angry or say things,
Well, and I don't know whether this is a generational thing. Just think back when you were a child. If you were crying and it wasn't over something substantial, did your parents really give in to that? My parents did.
No.
Didn't?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, no. It's like, no, this is what it's going to be. That's the meal. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Opposed to, well, catering. And parenting is not a democracy. Our children, we've had experience in life, years, that give us information that they haven't received yet. So to allow them to eat what they really would like to eat. And some kids, that might be healthy choices. You don't have to do anything with it. But the majority, they're not going to make those choices. In friends sometimes they mean well, but sometimes they'll get us in trouble. Name a time that your parent got you in trouble for something. Parents don't get you in trouble.
Well, nowadays some parents do because they're allowing stuff that is causing type 2 diabetes in little children because they can't say no because their kid will cry. And this is why I think it's really important that we remember our role and that we're parents. And our kids, even though we've had along the way some of that same difficulties and them being upset about things, they tell us how glad they are for discipline and for those restrictions and guidelines. They've actually verbalized that to us now. So they actually do want it, even though it doesn't seem like it in the moment.
They've done studies on that too. They took teenagers and interviewed them with their parent beside them, and then when their parent wasn't there, it was the same questions. Like, do you like to have a curfew? Do you like when your parent tells you what to wear and not to wear because it might be inappropriate? In front of the parents says, no, I don't like that. But behind closed doors, meaning when the parent wasn't there, same questions. Some of the responses was, for this one girl, sometimes I'll put on something that I know that is inappropriate, but I like it when my dad says no. So it's not always what the outward expressions and feelings that you're getting might not be the true feelings that they're feeling.
Yeah. They like to have guidelines and they like to know that you're going to stick with those guidelines. And this leads me to my next thing that I was going to say is no empty threats. This was big for me and I kind of screwed myself a few times over this one. But if you say something, you need to follow through. And so I have various examples of this, but one example was when we were in the grocery store with I was in the grocery store with Lucas, and I don't remember how old he was. He was maybe a few years old, 2 or 3 years old. And he was acting up, and I had a full cart of groceries. And I said, which be careful what you say because you have to follow through. I said, if you keep that up, we're leaving without all this stuff. And he had picked a few things during our time in the store that he was really looking forward to having. And I said, if you keep acting up like that, we're leaving without all this stuff. Well, he did keep acting up. And I was like, oh, dang it. Now I've got to leave all this stuff.
Full basket of groceries.
Come back another day to do this. So I went up to the manager and I said, I'm so sorry that I have to leave this cart, but my son's misbehaving. And so I left the cart and we went, and never again did that happen in the grocery store. Not once, because you have to follow through.
It's absolutely true. Okay, a threat is an empty promise. If you're going to say you're going to do something, you have to do it. And both parents have to be on this page with it. One parent can't be, well, it's okay to do, because now you're sending mixed messages. And being consistent, like you're saying, the first minute of the morning, I have a lot more patience than the last minute. But you have to be consistent with the child.
Yeah.
Because kids are smart. They'll play you.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, just think of when you're a kid. If you knew what the rules were, you'll push it to the edge.
Mm-hmm.
But at least you know the parameters.
Yeah.
And that's all, you're giving them a playbook so they know what is expected.
Right.
And, and I'll tell my parents, it's like, some kids are picky eaters. Okay, I get that. But it doesn't mean that you have to cater to their wants.
Yeah.
And I said, if they're really that much of a picky eater, put the foods on the plate that are not his favorite of the meal. And because, you know, sometimes kids they'll gravitate to what they like first. And let them eat that first. Or if you don't want to do that, you can just put the whole meal, but you have to say, you'll need to complete this meal. Because if you don't complete it, then it will be served at your next meal. Whether that's a breakfast or lunch, so be it.
Yeah.
And not getting upset with the kid if he doesn't complete the meal, because we want to take the emotion out of this from
That's
our
huge.
part. Okay,
Yeah.
the child,
They're going to
Well,
be whatever, but
right, but this is like just another rule that you have in your house that, okay,
very matter of fact.
yes,
Yeah.
you don't need to get upset. It's like, well, that's fine. You keep doing that, they'll eat it. Part of it is, if they don't eat everything, they're not having another different meal. It's that same meal.
Or snacks or whatever
Correct.
else. Yeah. And I think that with that, like for example, certain vegetables or something, maybe other types of things, but tends to usually be vegetables, you know, may not be everybody's favorite. And we didn't force, our son is probably more picky when it comes to vegetables, but we didn't force him to eat a big pile of asparagus.
No,
He
they're
had
not
to take
rabbits.
one, he had to take one polite bite.
Yes.
And then he had other vegetables that he could
Mm-hmm.
eat, so he still always had to eat vegetables. But I always had him have that polite bite, partly because after having it a number of times, one day, I don't know if he was 4 or 5, and he said, "Oh, I like asparagus now." But it's because he had it so many times that his taste buds started to get acclimated. Sorry, we've got a lot of background noise.
Yes.
I had a feeling this was going to happen outside.
It's our personal, jet.
Oh,
They're
yes.
about to land for us. I think the only caveat what we're saying with foods is kids with special needs, because I take care of kids with special needs, and sometimes it can be a textural issue, and I don't want this to be kind of like blanket that
Right,
okay,
right.
it will work for everybody. But if your child doesn't have any special needs, what we're saying, I do believe will work.
Yeah. And so going to that, staying on that same line with nutrition and food choices and things, I mean, one thing is whatever you're bringing into the house. I know that I had a question about teenagers and making good choices. And I think one of the things is to really talk to them about what good food does for their body. Now, if they're in a sport or some other activity, you know, what food does for their body, so that, because they're now at that age where you can reason. A toddler, you're not trying to reason with them. You are giving them rules and guidelines, and then you're following through. And what you say, and you follow through. With teenagers, you still need to have the same kind of guidelines and boundaries, but having that
More
conversation with them, because they're going to be launched out into the world and they need to be making these decisions for themselves without you there. I think too, just making sure that you're bringing food into the house that is healthy and trying to avoid having a bunch of stuff around that's not.
Right. Well, and then with, processed fast food, to having a healthy part of the discussion about these foods, because you don't want to get to the point of everything's taboo, but okay, I have an option here. What would be better for my body? And in times, if they want that fast food, okay, enjoy it, but this is not a regular occurrence.
Yeah.
And explaining, that, there's various foods that our bodies need. And Mickey D's, Burger King do not suffice it for all the qualities of foods that we need to have in our body.
Well, and one of the things from little kids, even carrying on into teenage years, that I just always liked was all the time food and sometimes food. So when you start to guide kids when they're young, that McDonald's is a sometimes food,
Right.
and vegetables or carrots or fruit or whatever, that's an all the time
All-time
food.
food.
And so that kind of gets that mentality going that, like you said, it's not like you can never have it, but this isn't something that we do all the time because it's just not good for us. And the other thing for like teenagers with working parents, so you're not there a lot, I would really consider cooking in bulk.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you put things either, we were just talking about this the other day, but you can get like those foil disposable pans and make twice as much, freeze half of it in one of those pans so that all you have to do is put it in the oven when you get home. It's already ready to go. Or prepping a bunch of vegetables on a Sunday while you're watching a movie or whatever you like, but trying to have things ready ahead of time that's easy to grab, I think is really
Right.
a
Well,
good way to do it.
if you only bring healthy options into the house, that's the only thing that they're going to have to eat in the house.
Yeah.
And so there's not that temptation of, oh, well, I'll just, eat these frozen dinners here.
Yeah.
And the food that mom prepared, I'll leave it for them.
Yeah.
And so even as a teenager, you can guide them to healthier choices without even, stating something.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, we had a specific question from my cousin actually, and she was.
How does she come up with all these great ideas? It's God-given.
She asked about her toddler and trying to say no to the toddler and how to make them understand or stop certain behaviors. So I'm going to give an example. He's going to have, I'm sure, something to say about this too. But when kids are really little and they are exploring, you want them to explore, but they also need limits. And one of the things that I think is really important that they understand that there are boundaries for things. One example is baby proofing your house. So to a certain extent, I think that's good. Like as far as keeping obviously dangerous things out of the way and everything, but you want to have them understand their boundaries in their home environment so that when you go into somebody else's house or you go somewhere, that when you say no, they already know, or they know that they're not supposed to go up to the china cabinet and start grabbing things because you don't allow that at your house. But if everything's padded and blocked with little walls and everything, they never get the opportunity to learn that, oh, there's a limit. I'm not supposed to go there. We didn't do extreme baby proofing. We put the little things in the sockets and,
Right.
There were no cleaning products down where they could grab them and things like that. But, I didn't pad up the whole house and I didn't keep them behind gates of every kind. But we had certain things, like for instance, this is going to go along with my cousin's question. So when our daughter Talia was very little, we had a fireplace that was, it was an electric, what do you call that? You flip the switch on?
Correct.
And then,
The
so
flame would
it still was
shoot.
warm, but
Right.
it wasn't like, I don't think she would have burned herself on it, but it could be. Anyway, so she was so curious, always wanting to go up and open those doors. And I literally sat there, I don't remember how many hours it was one day, sat on the couch, and she would crawl over, and I would say no. And for a while, I had to actually go up and do this on her hand and say no. And then I would take her away, and then she would crawl back. She would go to reach for it. I would say no, take her away. Then after doing this for, I don't know how long, it went on for hours, but she crawled back over and I'm like, no. And she looked back, and then she just would look at it. And then she'd crawl away. And that amount of time invested sounds exhausting, and Yet it started to transfer to other things.
Right. Well, and part of it is, I think at the beginning, it was like a game tour. And then after repeated times, like, oh, this isn't a game. She really doesn't want me to touch that. And I think a misnomer with, kids crawling, that they can't learn. They can't. You're not, like you were saying, you're not having this verbose conversation. You know why we don't want you to be next to that fireplace? It is very hot. You will burn you, They're going to be like, But, but she just knew, oh, I get close, she says no, I can't go near it.
Yeah.
Well, and then later, with her, if we were out in public and she was getting too far away, I had a word that I would say to her and that she would know to stop. And I just didn't want to say stop. So, being Mexican, I used the Spanish word for stop. And it really worked because I could scream it and she would stop wherever she was. I'm like, oh. And so it's repetition. And like what you're saying, it's kind of like compound interest because
Yes.
little things you're doing right now, you're just adding on as they get older.
Yep.
And it's going to make your life a lot easier
Yes.
when they're, a teenager.
Yes.
I'm not saying you do all this, oh, your life is golden. No. But it's these small little victories that's
Yeah.
going to add up to the big,
Yeah.
victory.
And there's something about that you have to realize there's going to be a payoff if you do the work now. Imagine the difficulty that you feel in those moments of trying to discipline and feeling like, let's say you never get to the point where you take the time to sit there when they're going up to the fireplace, but you have to deal with that every single time you go into a new environment. You have to deal with that same battle over and over and over, and you're still never getting it. And if you just deal with it during that time, it makes everything so much easier. I have another good example of that. When Talia was really little, we took her to swimming lessons, and at the pool, the way that the lesson was formatted is they would have their lesson with the teacher, and then there was a shallow end of the pool that the kids could have kind of like free play and keep swimming and stuff, and they had lifeguards that were available and they're nearby and everything. And so the kids were allowed to do that for a certain period of time, and then on they go, to the next thing. Well, the kids, 99% of the kids that were in that shallow end of the pool, not having their lesson, but just playing, parents could not get their kid out of the pool. Like, they're coaxing them, talking to them,
Or
counting down.
I love counting. I'm like,
You're
by
being
3,
facetious. You're
you
being
need to be here.
facetious.
Yes.
No.
What kid comes on 1?
Do not do that.
Now you've given the control over to the child.
Right. The countdown is no good. I never did the
No.
countdown.
If you want the child, anything you want, it's now. It's not
Yes.
on their time, it's on your
Now
time.
you can tell them we're going to be leaving in a minute. So
Yes.
get done with whatever
Right.
you're doing, or in 5 minutes,
Right.
get done with your activity and what you're playing, and then that's fine.
Right.
But not this. If you come now, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
No. It's, yeah. Because you just, like you said, you just keep putting the control back
Correct.
over to them. Well, anyway, so back to this story. So Talia was in the pool, and there was always this little reward as kids left their lesson. They had a thing of licorice as you exited. And, you were allowed 1 per kid. Well,
She
Talia
enjoyed her licorice.
Oh, she loved it. In fact, we always went to lunch with my mom afterwards, but I was so hard-nosed that she had to eat her lunch first that she would hold her
it,
little
yes.
red licorice in her hand. And by the time she got through lunch, holding this licorice the whole entire time, it was
Yes.
all oozed out all over her hand. But she didn't eat it. She just wanted to hold it. She just wanted to hold it, she would always say. So she ate her lunch, and then she would eat her licorice. But there was, I think we're having more problems again with the
Yes.
airplane. Sunday must be the busy day for that. So one day she tried to pull what these other kids do, which is as soon as the mom says it's time to get out, they would dunk underwater and swim the other way. Now mom's in clothes,
Yeah.
so she can't get her kid out of the pool, right? So most of these parents would either have to try to get the lifeguard to come down, get off and come down and grab the child and pull them out of the water, or they would start stepping down in their clothes into the steps. And one time Talia tried that, and I said, there is no licorice. When I tell you to come, you come. And she dunked under, swam away, and so I thought, oh, this is gonna be interesting. So I told her, you get out now, and she did, but she didn't listen the first time.
No.
And I already had given her the threat. I don't do empty threats. So we always showered at the place. So she took her shower, come out, she goes straight up to the little licorice
Yes.
bin. I'm like, no licorice for you today. She lost it. She lost it. She was crying, and I'm sorry, and I'm sorry, and nope, not licorice this time. This is what happens when you don't listen to mommy.
Right. Well, and the other thing is, you tell them, okay, the reason, but now you're not shaming them with it, but you're just
No.
like, okay, this is a consequence.
Yeah, and this is what we
This
set
is
up.
right.
Yeah.
And and consequences are apparent in life. If not everything you deserve, but this,
Yeah.
she did not follow the rules.
Yeah.
So if you don't follow the rules,
And
this is what happens.
Well, I never, ever, ever, not ever again had a fight with her. So every time I would be like, it's time to go, she would come
Yes.
right up out of the water. I didn't have to climb down in there. I didn't have to coax her. And all the empty threats, I can't tell you how many parents said, you're not going to get a licorice, and they
Yes.
all got it
Yeah.
on their way out. And it's no wonder that the next time the kid kept doing
Didn't
the
wanna-
same thing. And these
yeah.
parents are pulling their hair out every single time. So rather than just having that one moment of them being sad and disappointed, and you're fine with it as a parent because you know you're doing the right thing, and you know in the long run, I'm not going to have this fight with them every week.
Right.
You know?
And it's not about the licorice.
No.
It's about what you're expecting your child to do.
Yeah, and they're happier too.
Yeah.
They don't want to go through that every time. They don't want to
Right.
be having meltdowns every day.
No.
So I think that is probably one of the most important things, is just to remember that as you are a parent, that you are always looking out for their best interest, and that sometimes it's going to mean that they're disappointed and sad, but sometimes it's actually in the long run going to make them happier. And so I think that's probably, I don't know, do you have any other words of wisdom or?
No wisdom. Words, yes. Plenty of words I have. But no, it's like what you're saying. It's about you knowing why it needs to be done the way that you want it to have done. Your child might not know, and that's okay. And it's okay for them to be upset. But you are consistent with what you want.
Yeah.
And if you are, like you said, in the long run, you're going to enjoy your child that much more.
Yes.
God's giving you a beautiful gift of this child, and it's our responsibility to raise him or her in the right way.
Yeah. And, we really enjoy and love being with our
yeah.
kids. And,
It's fun.
we have 2 teenagers, and I would rather hang out with them than,
Don't look than me.
I was trying
She's
to
looking
think
at
because
me.
I'm going to
She's
offend
like-
everybody, so now I just chose to offend him only. No, but they're fun to be
Yeah.
with. People are like, oh, you have teenagers. And I'm like, oh, they're awesome.
Yes. And okay, do they always do the right thing? No.
No,
But they're fun to be around.
yeah.
And we just enjoy who they are.
Yeah.
Who they're growing up to be.
Yeah. And one of the people that I really respect a lot who has done an awesome job with her kids. Well, actually, the parents that I'm thinking of, she made a comment on that post about teaching old values and manners and saying please. And she talked about our role as parent, that we are helping them to learn how to survive without us. And I think that we so often hold our kids' hands so tightly that they don't get to learn how to survive without their parents. And so all of these things that we're talking about is helping them learn how to do that, because that is eventually the goal, is for them to be up and out and fully functional adults. And if we're not teaching them all of these things, we've not done our job. We've been a good friend to them maybe, but that's not our job.
No, basically as a parent, you're working your way out of a job.
Yeah.
And as a parent, we're not here to clear a smooth path for them. No. Them stumbling is totally fine. Okay, we are, as parents, here to point out potholes. Okay, this I don't think would be a good choice. But smooth path? No.
Yeah. So anyway, I hope that some of this was helpful to you all, and I was so glad that he agreed to do this video with me.
I was coerced. You don't understand.
I
I'm
have
under duress.
I have my ways to reward him.
Yes. I'm a latchkey husband. No, this has been fun.
No, but anyway, if you have any specific things that you are interested in, I'm sure I might be able to talk him into doing this again with us sometime. So please,
if you're willing, I will be obliged.
So leave a comment or question or whatever. But otherwise, I'm so glad that you were with us today, and thanks to my sweet husband for doing this with us. And I hope that you are living every day on fire. Woo!